everybody. Welcome back to Psychedelics Today. This is Joe Moore coming at you from Breckenridge, Colorado. I hope you're having a beautiful day. This is a Solidarity Friday episode, but a bit different. We have a two-parter here. We have Ben Sessa and Josh Bartch. Ben is a longtime staple of the psychedelic world. He's involved with Awakn, a really beautiful chain of clinics in Europe, UK, and Josh Bartch from Mydecine, co-founder, CEO over there, I believe. And Mydecine's doing some really cool stuff. They're partnered with Hopkins on the smoking cessation study with psilocybin patches. Very interested in trying those, but maybe not for a while. Maybe I need to become a smoker first. We'll see. So yeah, love Ben. Really appreciate Josh. We had some really great calls months and months ago, and I'm really excited about Mydecine. We'll see how they shake out. I wish them well. Awakn, Ben Sessa, partnered closely with David Nutt. Got to watch them on stage at Miami Wonderland. Really appreciated their energy, attitude, and insight. Really great stuff. I believe David might have executed both of these interviews, which is really cool. So David Drapkin on our team here, director of ops, he recorded both of these folks. And yeah, I wish I was there, actually. Don't believe I've had the opportunity to shake Ben's hand or Josh's in person. So, someday. Anyway, I hope you enjoy this episode. I think shortly we'll be back to our normal Friday programming where we, provide commentary on news. I believe they call it commentating in the biz. And there's a lot to discuss. There's a lot going on in the space, a lot to unpack. And we want to get that back to you soon. So stay tuned. Trust us. We're going to get back to it. Promise. So I think that's it for now in the intro, other than January 6th, Navigating Psychedelics for Clinicians and Therapists kicks off. Please check it out if you're interested. If you want to get a foothold in the space, take kind of your first step training that you can use on your resume when applying to other programs or getting jobs or whatever it is. I promise it helps. A lot of people have done it and been successful with it. We provide CEs in the state of California for therapists, nurses, and psychologists, and those are highly transferable to other states and regions, and I believe also to other professions. So check it out, psychedelicstoday.com to learn more. You'll see a big fat image there on the front page, and follow that and you'll get there. If you have any questions, info@psychedelicstoday.com to learn more. All right, everybody. This is Joe Moore. Enjoy the episode. We'll see you on the other side.
Hi, this is David Drapkin from Psychedelics Today at a Wonderland conference in Miami, and I have the pleasure of speaking to Dr. Ben Sessa of Awakn Life Sciences. Pleasure to meet you, Ben.
Great pleasure to be here. Thank you very much, David.
Yeah, so I think it's both our first times in Florida.
Indeed, yeah. Flying visit for me. Came in late last night, flying off again this afternoon.
Yeah. Are you going to be at the beach at all, or?
I actually went for a walk this morning. I thought I've got to do something about these deep vein thromboses of sitting on airplanes for 20 hours. So I went for a walk, went down to the beach this morning in the harbour. It was nice.
Yeah. And in all honesty, it must mean a lot to you to be here, because they just opened up the COVID rules to fly here. You had a horrific flight from, I spoke to Anthony Tennyson yesterday. So it must mean a lot to you being here. I'm interested to hear what it is that you came here to say and what's really, why is it so important to you to spread the message?
Well, it's great. It's a great conference. I've been working in the field of psychedelics for 15, 20 years. I've set up and run a UK conference called Breaking Convention and been to umpteen psychedelic conferences. And what's so interesting about this one, the whole field in the last few years, is that we're moving away from the pure academia and the research studies. And we're talking now about big investment for public health projects, which is fantastic. The psychedelics have moved out of that fringe academia side of research into setting up meaningful public health programs and treatments and clinics and opportunities for patients. So this conference, I think, marks a real turning point. The whole nature of this conference and the investment aspect of it. Really pleased to be here.
Interesting. So the merger between public and private and capital and research coming into one place, this does definitely bring it all together, as other conferences perhaps are more looking at the clinical and scientific as a bit separate. As Chief Medical Officer at Awakn Life Sciences, how do you see your role as helping to bring kind of the evidence base, the research, both yours and Professor David Nutt's, into this vessel that is got so much money and hype blustering around it? So how do you want to navigate these waters right now, would you say?
Well, when I set up Awakn Life Sciences, I brought in all of my mates and buddies that I've worked with over the years. So I brought David with me. I brought my entire MDMA research team with me. And the scientific advisory board with Matt Johnson and Michael and Annie Mithofer and Celia Morgan. These are all people I've known for years. And I think this is one of the things that I bring to Awakn. And one of the things that Awakn has, I think, above and beyond other companies is just the depth and breadth of experience. You know, we've been doing this longer than anyone else. We've been there, well, apart from MAPS, of course, but we've been there, and I'm good buddies with Rick and have been for getting on 20 years. So you're absolutely right. It's about bringing in the science and the clinicians and using that to develop the platform for the research and the development and the delivery of psychedelics. And the delivery part of it from the chief medical officer role is a really exciting part for me. This is building clinics. So there's lots of companies who are making molecules, who are developing drugs, looking towards approval. But there are very few who are actually building bricks and mortar clinics. And so that's where we really want to stand out as well. Actually be the high street presence of psychedelics for delivery of these new medicines.
High street presence, and next to like W.H. Smith's and Boots.
Yeah, I'd like to think more like Waitrose or Harrods maybe.
Harrods, yes. So lovely. You know, I've got to mention, I'm just delighted to meet with you. I've been in America 9 years. I'm an LCSW, so licensed clinical social worker. I specialize in addiction 15, 20 years from
Fantastic.
Inpatient, detox, rehab, residential. I'm angry. Mm-hmm. I'm pissed off. I'm going to say it. I've heard you use similar words. I've heard David Nutt use similar words. I've heard Anthony Tennyson use similar words. So there is an anger and a fiery energy around addiction treatment about where it's been over the last 50 years. And the doldrums really that it's been stuck in around evidence, research and training. So coming from that kind of angry, fiery, but place of wanting to just make positive change happen quickly. How do you channel that energy, you and your team?
Well, you know, you're absolutely right to be angry. And myself and colleagues in the field, not just in addictions, but in mental health in general, you know, I can't think of any other branch of medicine that would accept the kind of outcomes that we do in psychiatry. I often talk about this, how psychiatry is this fairly desperate, lonely place to work. We don't cure our patients. We don't use that word cure. We get alongside them in a palliative care way and just patch them up with daily maintenance drugs. And, you know, and the truth is, if you're going in to see your psychiatrist in your early 20s with a severe anxiety-based disorder like PTSD or any addiction or depression or anxiety, there's a pretty good chance you'll be talking to that psychiatrist in your 60s or 70s. That is not good enough after 100 years of modern psychiatry. And the reason being is that we've been trapped in this top-down biological model for the last 40 or 50 years, giving people daily maintenance drugs, papering over the cracks, but never getting to the core. And the core is trauma, and trauma is through psychotherapy. And we have so many different psychotherapies, but they just don't work on so many people. The depth of their pain and their trauma is so great that they've become absolute experts at avoiding those painful memories. And what psychedelic drugs do, working in that unique altered state of consciousness with good focused psychotherapy, we can attack the cause of this issue and actually break that chain and break those rigid narratives that arise in very early childhood as a result of trauma and cure the patient. You know, I often say this, I want to be like an orthopedic surgeon. I don't want to be a psychiatrist. I want to get people in, mend their broken leg, kick them out and never see them again. And we don't do that in psychiatry. We just have them for life. I think with psychedelics are the most effective, innovative, creative form of psychopharmacology we've had for 100 years in psychiatry. They really do now offer us a chance to change completely the paradigm by which we manage mental illness. And, you know, and people talk about this psychedelic renaissance. Great book, by the way. Highly recommend it.
Who wrote that?
I wrote that book.
Name drop. Great.
I wrote that book over 10 years ago.
Wow.
And so it's fabulous now to hear people using that term
Very
everywhere.
prophetic, yeah.
Yeah. And, but, you know, this is more than just a psychedelic renaissance. This is a psychiatric renaissance. It really is a whole new paradigm, a whole new way of doing mental illness, and particularly addictions. Because you're absolutely right. You know, you're right to be angry. I'm angry. Our worthy and deserved patients, they deserve better than this. And I think we really have a good chance to do that for them now.
So many areas I'd like to go quickly about the anger that some of us feel in this field, particularly in America, around the war on drugs, the drug war, that has such significant cultural overtones. In England, would you say that research has been stymied in a similar way from a war on drugs? And does that also have racial overtones and undertones? And what's happening right now around regulation, reform and policy, particularly in America with MDMA and psilocybin being fast-tracked, given breakthrough status by the FDA, which is really the FDA saying, we're sorry for what we did before, in my opinion.
Yeah.
What's it like over there in England?
Man, I'm not sure you really want to get me started on talking about drug policy and the war on drugs. Yeah, never has there been such a dangerous, unethical, unpoliceable socio-political policy that's persisted for over 50 years, unaudited, against scientific advice, non-evidence-based. It's appalling. It's disgusting. And successive Home Secretaries have blood on their hands for the deaths of young people, the damage to societies, the creation of the mafia, crime. There's absolutely no question whatsoever that it will end, and it's in its dying embers, the war on drugs. We will look back in whether it's 5, 10 or 20 years' time on an international level and hang our heads in shame at this ridiculous failed policy. And we will have a much better world for it where drugs are regulated. And in terms of its effect on research, absolutely. It's so costly. It's difficult. It's costly. It's not impossible. You know, a well-written protocol will get ethics and MHRA support, but these are Schedule I drugs, which means it costs a lot of money to get licenses and it takes a lot of time. And it certainly puts off a lot of researchers. And the people who are missing out are the patients. So yeah, it's about time that politicians stopped meddling in science and listened to the experts. The evidence is so strong all over the world now, and it's really quite embarrassing because, you know, the UK has a absolutely fabulous track record in terms of psychopharmacology research, but we've got one of the most archaic drug systems in the world in terms of policy. We're slowly moving forward. We've got medical cannabis now just beginning thanks to David Nutt's work. And I hope it's going to change soon. Rick Doblin always says that when it happens, it'll happen suddenly. And I think that's right. I was just talking with Matt Johnson this morning over breakfast, and we're getting to the point where it's suddenly going to be very uncool not to back psychedelics, and at a governmental level. And what's going to happen is all the politicians are suddenly going to say, oh, yeah, we back psychedelics. We always have. And it's kind of frustrating for those of us. It's like, well, where were you 15 years ago, you know, when you were being cynical and critical? But, you know, we take the change gracefully, and it is moving forward and it is changing. And good for that, because, you know, the patients really need this.
Thank you, Ben. Really appreciate you speaking from the heart. Thinking about patients' perspective. So we're talking about politicians on one side. What's the atmosphere like in England right now? What's the level of education and awareness and openness and interest around psychedelics? The average person with or without depression, trauma and addiction, what do they know? What do they think about it? And are you seeing a bit of a renaissance in people's kind of minds about it?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think one of the problems that we have within the psychedelic community is we live in this bubble, and we come to these great conferences like this or places like Breaking Convention or other psychedelic conferences, and we all sort of whoop and punch the air and sort of think change is in the air. But we kind of forget that the minute we walk out of the doors, most people out there think that LSD makes you fly and jump out of windows and one ecstasy pill will kill you. And, you know, I would like to say that there's a massive groundswell of opinion in the general public. It is starting, there's no doubt, but it's nothing like as great as we think. And I think we need to bear that in mind. Most people still if I'm going to credit the war on drugs with one thing, it's done brilliantly. It has poisoned the minds of intellectual and erudite people for the last 50 years very effectively. You know, I meet senior doctors who really should know better, whose opinions on psychedelic drugs come from the tabloid newspapers. That's appalling. You know, this is psychopharmacology. They should know better. And these are doctors. So I would like to say that everybody is behind us, but I know they're not. So what psychedelics really needs is good PR. Mm-hmm. You know, we don't even need any more research. We all know these bloody drugs work and they're safe and they're effective and they help patients. What we need is fantastic agencies to do the advertising and get the message out there, because it's not even that difficult, the science. The results of all the psychedelic research of the last 15 years have been staggering across the board. They've all been safe. They've all been efficacious. They've all absolutely blown out of the water the best current treatments available by a long way. So it's incontrovertible, the evidence, yet there is a big hangover in the minds of people and politicians that these drugs are dangerous because they're banned and they're used recreationally. And that's a big hurdle to get over. And I do what I can as a scientist. You know, my world is full of evidence-based data and science, but I know that those tools are not enough. You know, David and I have been sort of plonking piles of data onto successive Home Secretaries' desks for 20 years, and it's not got anywhere. What we need is front page media attraction. We need heartwarming stories from people who've been helped. We need that kind of thing, because just the data alone is not enough. You know, unfortunately, and this is where one feels so impotent as a scientist, data doesn't sway politicians. Sentimentality and vote-winning stories from families, that sways politicians. Very frustrating. You'd think opinion, politics ought to be evidence-based, but it's not. So yeah, we need something more creative than anything I can offer.
That's fascinating, really fascinating. You've said quite a few things there about data, and something that I've really picked up from Awakn, there's not too much fluff. There's data.
Yeah.
I am not very good at remembering numbers, but I'm confident at making things up. So I often make up the statistic, the data points from your trial that you did with MDMA for alcohol use disorder in England a while back. I think it was 2 or 3. So can you just, perhaps if you could, juggle with these 3 different pieces of data that I know you're top on at Awakn. You've got that MDMA trial that you did.
Yeah.
I'd like to hear about that. I'd like to hear about the IP and the molecules that you've got, and with Professor Nutt. And I also believe there's a partnership with Celia Morgan and Exeter University.
Yeah.
Could you cover those 3 angles? Anything else around that subject?
Absolutely. So in terms of the MDMA study, this was the world's first MDMA-assisted psychotherapy study to treat an addiction. We chose alcoholism because it's a massive public health problem. It was the world's first study on clinical MDMA that wasn't sponsored by MAPS. It was independent of that. And we chose alcoholism because we know that trauma is so prevalent in alcoholism. I've always thought of alcoholism as basically PTSD plus alcohol. Before we did the MDMA study, we carried out a observational study, a treatment as usual study, looking at alcoholics undergoing detox. And then without any intervention from ourselves, we followed them up for 9 months. And so this group of people, they had a detox, and then they had the very best modern medicine gives people post-detox: MAP groups, one-to-one therapy, group therapy, AA, inpatient rehab, all of those things, anti-craving drugs. And very sadly, but not unexpectedly, by 9 months, 76% had returned to pre-detox levels of drinking. So that was our observational group. Then we did the MDMA study with all of the same, not the same cohort, it was a different study, but all of the same entry criteria. And we gave them an 8-week course of MDMA-assisted psychotherapy with 2 sessions with MDMA alongside preparation and integration sessions. And at 9 months, that group, 21% had returned to pre-detox levels.
So that's 4 times.
76% without MDMA, 21% with. That is a staggering result. You know, you don't see results like that in psychopharmacology. Now, that was a small pilot study. It was an open label study. And the next step that we're doing at Awakn Life Sciences is progressing that to a phase 2B randomized controlled placebo study. And we are in the process of submitting that to MHRA and ethics at the moment, with the goal of pushing that towards phase 3 and eventually seeing MDMA-assisted psychotherapy licensed as a treatment for alcohol use disorder. And we're very confident in those results. So that's the MDMA study. The next thing you asked was about the new molecule design.
Yeah,
absolutely.
The IP of Professor Nutt. Yeah.
Absolutely. So David owns IP on a bunch of whole new chemicals that haven't been developed before. We have Sean McNulty, who is a very experienced researcher. He is leading that research alongside David. What we're looking for there is, MDMA is a fascinating, unique pharmacological compound, this ability to turn off the amygdala and allow trauma-focused psychotherapy. But it's an 6 to 8 hour effect. And that, whilst very useful, is quite cumbersome clinically. So what we're looking at is whether we can develop new molecules, new chemicals, completely unique, that have the same entactogenic qualities of MDMA, but can be delivered in a 2-hour window. So, for example, intramuscular ketamine is sort of 90 minutes, makes it very useful and clinically deliverable. You can see more patients that way. So we've always got an eye on the clinical deliverability of our programs. We want to see these on the NHS. We want to see these in mass public health use. So if we can develop an entactogen with the same qualities of MDMA, but in a 2-hour window, that would be a huge step forward in terms of increasing accessibility. So that research is now well underway, and we've identified several compounds that fit the criteria we need, and we're pushing forward with that research program, and that is going to yield fruit in the next few years.
Wonderful.
In terms of the ketamine and alcohol, another world first from Awakn Life Sciences is Celia Morgan's ketamine-assisted psychotherapy study for the treatment of alcoholism. That was the world's first controlled psychotherapy ketamine study, and Celia is part of Awakn, and she is now progressing that. The phase 2b study is complete in that, and we are now able to actually run the care program, the protocol, with our patients at Awakn. So that is available now. So Awakn is the only company in the world that can actually say they are running an evidence-based ketamine-assisted psychotherapy program protocol. So that's underway. And again, that's moving towards phase 3 eventually, we hope, to see ketamine-assisted psychotherapy licensed as a treatment for alcohol use disorder. So it's all of these things together. It's development, it's research, and it's delivery, all rolled into one from a world-beating team of scientists and clinicians who've been in this longer than anyone else.
Wonderful. And I know a little bit about the move in England, and you're soon to open a clinic in my hometown of Birmingham. I can't wait to go there and visit. I also heard that you, I think, acquired 3 clinics in Norway, and soon to be licensing your protocols in America early next year. And talking from the perspective of addiction being this, huge illness and impact that it has throughout the world, developed and developing countries, global. How do you think Awakn can be part of that kind of scaling of this globally to people throughout the world to license these protocols and these compounds, and particularly looking at what you're planning on doing it first in Europe and then in America? What's your own plan?
Yeah, I mean, scaling is essential. Alcoholism is massive. It's a huge public health problem. It damages the lives of individuals and families, costs billions, huge drain on public resources and public healthcare systems, and it's so poorly treated with such bad outcomes. In many ways, it's kind of low-hanging fruit in terms of a clinical disorder that needs to be tackled. We were better at treating addictions 100 years ago in Victorian times than we are today. This is the sad irony of it. So yeah, we've got this rollout of clinics. We have 2 clinics open now, one in Oslo in Norway, one in Bristol in the UK. The London clinic is opening in the next couple of months. Then we've got Manchester, and we've got Dublin, we've got Birmingham, we're looking at Leeds. We're planning on 20 to 25 clinics throughout the UK and Europe in the next 4 to 5 years.
Brilliant.
This high street presence for the deliverability. And indeed, like you say, we're also working with licensed partners throughout the world and globally, particularly in the States and Canada, to start rolling out our care program, which is this evidence-based treatment for AUD. So we really are looking on a global scale because this is a global problem. Even before COVID, approximately 25% of people were drinking harmfully, over 14 units of alcohol a week. That was pre-COVID. It's estimated that that's now 30 to 40% of the population who are drinking harmfully. And a significant number of those will go on to alcohol dependency. So we are sitting on an alcohol epidemic waiting to happen. And the treatments are so bad. And the worst thing about the treatments is they are so expensive into the traditional treatments. The amount of times I've thrown hundreds of thousands of pounds at patients, and they've gone in for lengthy inpatient rehabs for 6 months. They walk out on their day of discharge straight into the pub. I've seen it a million times. So what we're doing with the traditional treatments is we're throwing good money at bad outcomes. So if we can develop short, focused, safe, effective treatment programs for addictions, particularly alcoholism, then we really have a huge potential to alter this terrible problem for society.
Fantastic. So the ketamine work that you're doing now is a world first.
Mm-hmm.
What do you expect the time frame to be around the healing process, keeping in mind the extent of trauma in the brain and in the person that has co-occurring disorder, dual diagnosis? How many sessions are we imagining, both with MDMA and with ketamine? And taking on board what you were saying earlier, that psychiatry has been this daily pill that you take until you die. So how is this going to work differently? And how's that going to fit in with, cost accessibility, with how many treatments, how many sessions, and how to make it affordable and accessible, do you think?
So you got to think of psychedelic therapies as the antithesis of the current treatments, which is, like you said, this daily maintenance therapy with drugs that don't work, SSRIs, mood stabilizers, hypnotics. It's a intensive upfront treatment, a bit like mending a broken leg. It's a lot of work and it's a lot of sessions, and there's an upfront cost. And for the treatments of depression and anxiety and PTSD and eating disorders that we're doing, it's a 9-week course of psychotherapy sessions, 11 visits, 4 assisted by ketamine. For the treatment of alcohol, it's a similar protocol, but with 3 longer sessions with ketamine and longer treatments, longer psychotherapy treatments. So it's roughly a sort of 6 to 9 week course in which you take ketamine 3 to 4 times alongside psychotherapy. And that's what makes it so important. What we are not is a ketamine infusion center. We're seeing these ketamine infusion centers cropping up all over the world, especially in Canada and the States, where they just deliver high-dose ketamine intravenously as an antidepressant. And it works pretty well as a short-acting antidepressant, but it wears off and you have to go back and you stay in maintenance therapy. I came into psychedelics to get away from maintenance therapy. So it's a short, intensive, upfront psychotherapy course, which we are aiming to be curative. Now, it may be that some patients wish to repeat the course at 3 months, 6 months, a year. We're very keen not to see it become maintenance therapy. We don't want this to be coming in week after week, month after month. The point about using the psychotherapy is that it helps patients to once and for all overcome these rigid narratives and move on and be cured. So we're using ketamine-assisted psychotherapy in the same way as I was trained to use MDMA and psilocybin, to enhance psychotherapy, to provide this once and for all transformative breakthrough experience in which they resolve these distant, rigid childhood issues, and then they're better. So it'll remain to be seen how many times we need to repeat the course, but the aim is that this is going to work first time and they won't need to keep repeating it. But, these are early days and we will refine it as we go along. And I think we've got the best team in the world to make those refinements because very keen eye on the clinical research as well as the outcomes.
Great. Quick fire questions. Ready?
Yeah, go for it.
Sitting comfortably. Talk to me about gambling disorder and how it is that you want to affect that over the next few years.
So behavioral disorders, not just gambling, but also sex addiction, pornography addiction, these are, they're very poorly looked at. There's very little evidence about the neurobiology behind them, whether it's the same as substance misuse addictions. And there's pretty much zero evidence on effective treatment. So we're targeting that with our ketamine-assisted psychotherapy. It's a much, much bigger problem than we think. Those people that present clinically are just the tip of the iceberg. There's a massive volume of people below the water with subclinical difficulties with sex addiction, gambling addiction, pornography addiction. So this is a massive area of public health that, again, we believe is going to be big in the future. So we're absolutely targeting that with our ketamine research.
Wonderful. Thank you. Next question. I saw that you've recently signed a letter of intent with MindCure. I'm a huge fan of what they're doing. And Kelsey Ramsden, they've got their kind of digital therapeutics platform. I think it's called iStream. And we're talking about scaling. We're talking about providing education to patients and just making it more, I think, available perhaps even for psychotherapy through telehealth. So how do you see that relationship with MindCure and the general question of digital health, telehealth?
Yeah, we have a whole branch of our R&D called Digital Ecosystems at Awakn Life Sciences. We're well aware that digital systems, worn devices, collecting patient data in real time, having patient feedback through phone apps and easily accessible methods to collect data and use that to develop our programs and fine-tune our treatments, both on a company scale, but also on a personal, individual, bespoke scale. So patients get their own personalized care plans that they make. I work for the patient. They are my boss. They drive what I do. I don't tell them what to do. They tell me what they want and need, and I sit alongside them while we get there. And the use of digital technology is really important. And the affiliations that we're making with these groups globally are an excellent opportunity for us to roll this out with licensed partners around the world and really spread this to increase the accessibility to more people.
Wonderful. Iboga, and that molecule and its effect potentially for addiction. So I've seen fantastic anecdotal reports coming from Africa, from Mexico, Costa Rica. What's your interest and your brief perceptions of Ibogaine and that molecule?
Ibogaine is a fascinating molecule for two reasons. Firstly, it works acutely to actually reduce the acute withdrawal effects of opiates. So a patient in opiate withdrawal, the immediate effect of Ibogaine is it dampens that withdrawal syndrome. So that's fantastic. But also, in combination with psychotherapy, and the psychedelic experience that it produces, it's a tool to enhance psychedelic psychotherapy. So a wonderful opportunity for the treatment of opiate use disorder, both acutely in terms of withdrawal, but also in providing psychotherapy for lasting healing. A lot more research needs to be done. It's certainly a drug that has some toxicity risks and issues, mainly cardiac, but these can easily be managed and controlled by screening patients, carrying out ECGs, monitoring them carefully. So there's no reason why it wouldn't be clinically deliverable. It's not an area of research that I've particularly focused on. I'm well aware of, like you mentioned, the observational studies within indigenous communities in West Africa, in which it's found that those people who use Ibogaine in ritual, ceremonial circumstances have much lower rates of alcoholism. Similarly, we see amongst peyote using people in Native American people. So yeah, these compounds that have been used for millennia certainly deserve modern research, because if they can be useful to reduce the distress and the burden on people today, absolutely. And I'm well behind any of that.
Beautiful. I've got two more quick fires.
Cool.
How do you see this fitting in with detox rehab, that kind of traditional system? Could there be ketamine in detox in inpatient unit, or perhaps a pathway that just helps have a kind of a warm handoff to your local Awakn center?
Absolutely. We are really, really keen to make affiliations with existing partners who are working in detox and inpatient rehab. We believe that our program is superior to the current detox and rehab options. It's quicker, it's faster, and it's a hell of a lot cheaper compared to a lengthy inpatient detox and rehab program. So we're very keen to work with licensed partners to put Awakn programs into their existing programs, and we think they will outperform the existing programs. So we're keen to either be opening our own detox and rehab centers or work with our programs licensed by existing centers. It's all just part of increasing accessibility globally. For too long, patients have been suffering. For too long, patients have had to accept substandard treatments. We now have the tools to change that forever.
Amazing. And my final question, light one, piece of toast, Branson pickle, or Marmite? Which do you choose?
Marmite, please.
Yeah, hands down?
Yeah.
Wonderful. I'm a Branson pickle man.
Okay.
So this is David Drapkin of Psychedelics Today and Ben Sessa of Awakn Life Sciences. It's been a real pleasure. Any closing thoughts you'd like to share with our viewers and audience?
Good luck to all of you. Don't give up. Stay focused, yeah? I remember 15 years ago, 20 years ago when I was a junior doctor telling my tutors that I wanted to work in psychedelics, and they said, "You're crazy. This is career suicide. This is just a bunch of crazy fringe hippies. Why are you getting involved in this?" Well, I can tell you now, this is not crazy fringe hippies. This is cutting edge neuroscience. This is cutting edge clinical psychiatry. Every single major clinical research institution in the world now has psychedelic programs running. This is not the fringe. This is where it's at. Get involved.
Wow. Thank you, Ben. Thanks for listening, everybody. Stay well and continue doing what you're doing. This is a renaissance. And thanks again, Ben. Real pleasure. God bless.
Nice one.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Psychedelics Today. This is our first interview here at Microdose Wanderlust. And today we have CEO and co-founder of Mydecine, Josh Bartch. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. Honored to be the first interview of the day.
Yeah, I'm really excited. So I guess give the listeners a little bit of background, who you are and some of the work that you're doing over at Mydecine.
Yeah, sure. So my name's Josh Bartch, the co-founder and CEO of Mydecine Innovations Group. Background is really in technology startups. Have been the co-founder of a number of different startups, ranging from technology to cannabis to, the variety, kind of ran the gamut, has had, a number of successes in that. And it's been an interesting career. Mydecine was really founded on, looking at what we know as efficacious templates that are found in nature predominantly, and looking at those as kind of a first generation template that's been proving and more so, recently continues to prove out that it's incredibly effective and much safer than what's currently available in SSRIs or different addictive treatments. And then looking at ways that we can take that molecule as a baseline and make several iterative improvements to, fix some of the known shortfalls or pitfalls, things like half-life controllability, stability on the shelf, right? So making sure that a psilocin analog is stabilized and able to be delivered in a traditional pharmaceutical format, but also looking at, delivery mechanisms and then kind of the second generation of drug coupled with therapy to make it much more applicable in a traditional already existing therapy infrastructure, right? So for us, we kind of have, a vision of when do you see success? And for us, is success in this industry is when this is offered in already existing traditional medical and therapy settings and offered as a frontline treatment, right? Not in a secondary psychedelic center or this unique infrastructure that's kind of being built, but when it's integrated into the actual already existing frontline medical community, that's when we really think that's a win for all of us. And obviously that takes refinement of the first generation of drug to accomplish that.
How long do you think that's going to take?
Obviously drug development is a long process, right? I think there's going to be milestones achieved over several years, right? But first generations are going to come out relatively soon. You already have ketamine on the marketplace. MAPS is making tremendous, leaps forward to commercializing that drug and bringing it to patients. Obviously, Compass, we expect phase 2B data here probably, either this month or next month, but in the relatively short term, and that'll move into a pivotal 3 and then hopefully, be available sometime 2024. We have a smoking cessation drug, Myco-001. We believe that will be commercialized by, in about 2024, give or take. But after that starts to really permeate, you're going to see hopefully what we believe is incredibly successful clinical results. And you'll start to see that learning curve and kind of that adoption curve. Because I think you have two different kind of obstacles to jump over. You have public acceptance or FDA approval, and then you have public adoption, right? Which is going to be this slower, kind of more gradual trend that takes a lot of education, a lot of really good people, a lot of proper messaging, collaboration in the space to make not only the niche market that already may be using these in a recreational context or in a therapeutic context, but are more open to it, but also just the general average individual that's suffering from one of these indications that says, I'm open to doing this. And I think you need to change the kind of, the context of how the message is delivered away from this psychedelic to, these are really effective molecules with incredible safety profiles and very efficacious that, is much better than what's currently available.
Yeah. When you talk about that, I guess, do you have a plan on how you would help to change public perception around this? I know you said education, but yeah, this is I think a big thing as you're talking. I'm thinking about the roadblocks and challenges that are going to come up. And I think for mainstream adoption, it is really trying to change that narrative and get people to feel comfortable about it. I don't know how many people are like, psychedelics, I don't want to touch that. I don't want to lose control of my mind.
Yeah. So Mindleap Health is an application that we have that, has a number of purposes. It's a platform application. But one of the main intents of Mindleap is to really provide a platform that gives digestible content that educates the general consumer, right? So, we have a ton of collaboration on there with some of the world top providers, not only of psychedelic, but also of addiction therapy, sleep disorders, eating disorders, a variety of different professional backgrounds that are talking about not only those indications, but also how psychedelics can be incredibly effective in a really digestible manner. So letting the average individual understand what are these molecules, how do they interact with the brain, how do they interact with the body, what can I expect, how do I prepare, what works for what indication, so people can also really, educate themselves and hopefully become, an adopter of the potential treatment if they're suffering and need the help. So I think giving people access to content, platforms like yourself and, interviews with people that are conveying the proper message is absolutely, imperative to the success of the overall success of the market, really. And if you can give people access to it in an intuitive manner that they don't have to be publicly out there saying, I'm a psychedelic supporter, but they can do it in the comfort of their own home, I think it's gonna really help in that process for sure.
Yeah, and I guess I know you guys acquired Mindleap,
yep.
And I guess what was the plan behind that? And
Yeah. So the first iteration of Mindleap and kind of what we were excited about when we acquired it is, we see a issue with the scalability of these treatments, generation 1 and, thereafter. Whereas the vast majority of the equation is actually one-on-one interaction with a psychotherapist, right? With no substances taken at all. It's a sobering one-on-one interaction with psychotherapist. But there's a very limited, resource pool of where can I actually access these therapists in person, right? So it has to be done remotely, but you don't have an aggregation of trained professionals under any sort of telehealth application where people can actually go and access those individuals for treatment. So we saw that as, a huge pitfall in the industry that needed to be addressed. And that's really what Mindleap originally was set out to do. And we've taken that and obviously continued to build on that. Now we have over 155 active specialists, trained, accredited specialists, actively on the actual platform. That's, individuals that are either undergoing psychedelic integration, are going to go on an experience, or maybe traveling to some of the retreats or whatever. And obviously also with ketamine clinics, now the vast majority don't have that therapy infrastructure or even offer it as a service. So we provide that now. And we have the largest aggregation that I'm aware of by far of trained professionals under one roof on a HIPAA compliant telehealth platform that's very easy to use. And also has, a lot of unique features, journaling features, et cetera, that can really help the individual kind of through that experience. And then after that, we also, launched the media platform. And again, that is hundreds of hours of proprietary produced content. Many of your colleagues have been on there as well, but looking at things, not only interviews and not only, verbal conversation, but also guided meditation, addiction services, sleep aids, et cetera. But, kind of an aggregate of ancillary services that promote the overall mental health and well-being without having to be physically present with somebody, which we think is, incredibly beneficial moving forward for sure.
Yeah. I think Manesh was telling us he's got some videos on there. He's awesome. Yeah. So shout out to Manesh.
Yeah. Shout out Manesh. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think I chatted with the folks with Mindleap 1, and what I was, I guess, really blown away was by the application intake process. There was a lot of education, and I like that it's combined with that mental health platform. Thinking about, where do people find these types of practitioners? You have psychedelic.support and, the MAPS list, which really isn't being updated anymore. But to be able to have that on one integrative platform seems really awesome. But I was just really impressed by, just the intake and application process there, that you guys are actually going ahead and really trying to provide some sort of screening process there for the people coming in.
Yeah, 100%. So we accept about 15% of the applicants that we get on the application, right? It's a relatively small figure, and still we have over 155, but they absolutely go through a very in-depth screening process. Not only looking at, what is their educational background, what's their experience, but also personally, there's a very in-depth personal background as well, because we want to make sure that we're going to be a trusted provider of this treatment, and our specialists are a reflection of us as an application. So we take it very seriously on who we actually let into the application.
Yeah. Well, we have David Drapkin here as well. Do you have any questions that you want to get into?
Yeah, great being here, Josh. I'm interested as a therapist, with the clinicians that are on your platform, how do they find patients, and how do patients find them? So what kind of matching process is there to find the right person? Because that can be a difficult thing to do.
Yeah, sure. So now we have, almost like an Instagram news feed, if you will, and that's probably a bad way to portray it, but we have a news feed that's only accessible by the general public to access the content, but only the specialists that are approved on the application can post on it. And these are short clip videos or bios or things of that nature that allow the therapist or the specialist or whatever their background is, because we have actually a diverse background offering on the application, but allows them to publicly announce themselves or give a short clip about themselves or what their specialty is, to really engage the individual and essentially solicit that that's potentially the right purpose and person for them. Eventually, in kind of the next generation, we'll be monitoring a number of survey questions, a number of input points, a number of analytical tracking that uses an AI technology that we're building that will automatically direct you to a suggested specialist that's looking to essentially address some of the issues that maybe you're having that we can inherently find out. So, it's an iterative process. Again, we're building it, adding more sophisticated measures that's going to be able to really kind of track and help people kind of access their in-app solutions without them having to seek them out, if that makes sense.
Wonderful. Sounds like it's like psychology today, how you can kind of find the right person and maybe find someone who's in network that can work on smoking cessation or trauma. How about at-home therapy? So this is telehealth primarily. Do you foresee any potential for, say, at-home ketamine use with lozenges, or is it primarily just the talk therapy, the integration therapy that you kind of want to use Mindleap for?
Yeah, so at the current moment, you could utilize it as that. I think it's really up to the comfort level of patient and practitioner. We don't support facilitating anything that's obviously illegal or not approved at this point. That's in place for the interaction to take place confidentially between therapist and patient. I do absolutely believe that, some of the kind of preliminary testing that's coming in as far as, what is the delta between the durability of ketamine treatment if there's therapy incorporated, and you're seeing a significant improvement on that treatment. So I think it's imperative, but there's not a solution, and Mindleap absolutely is a now solution that people can use that both pre and post for at-home ketamine. For me, the idea of ketamine, and just full disclosure, the idea of ketamine being shipped to the house is a scary proposition. And I think it's potentially a landmine that I'm not so sure how I feel about it, because it's not being monitored, right? And I think that that's an addictive substance that needs to be monitored. And I also think the same thing is true, less the addictiveness, because psilocybin and LSD, just are not addictive. They're proven to not be addictive for a number of reasons. It loses its binding affinity, et cetera. And it's really just not something that most people want to do every day. But needless to say, I think that ketamine runs the risk of potentially being abused in that at home. So I think it's very important for them to be interacting with a professional that's kind of adding a monitoring level to that treatment. So, absolutely, I think it's something that can be used now and should be used. They shouldn't be left alone by themselves without some sort of a support mechanism that, kind of adds a layer of monitoring there.
Lovely. Thanks, Josh. And I guess one other question, again, looking ahead to the future, once your trials get to phase 3 and all goes well, that'd be a great period of time. Would we expect to see Mydecine clinics that are kind of connecting the Mindleap, the telehealth platform, with a Mydecine clinic, or do you think it might be more like strategic partnerships with existing networks, or kind of a bit of M&A work as other players in the field are kind of doing now in preparation for when they get through phase 3?
Yeah. So again, I think that for us, the commercialization plan is being developed. However, I don't think that you'll see Mydecine clinics. Wouldn't take anything off the table, because obviously, you pivot at any given time and businesses evolve. But, going back to what kind of the first point, one of the first points that I made is that, we see a vision where you don't need a specific clinic, that this is something that can be offered in existing infrastructure. So your existing therapist can then offer that as a treatment. It's going to take improvements. And I think one of the main improvements is, which is still to be proved out if it's as efficacious, but to control the half-life. But on the first generation, I definitely think that we'll be working with outside partners for sure. And then the second generation, as you can control that half-life, so you can have, traditional already existing staffing handle that type of treatment, then, we'll look to work with normal frontline, medical therapy clinics, et cetera. So, that's the goal, hopefully. But as far as, us owning internalized clinics, I don't think that's in the plan.
What's that process like of trying to control the half-life?
Yeah, so there's a number of structural changes that you can make on molecules that can either increase or reduce the half-life, right? So I can't go into too many details as to what our strategy is or how we've been able to accomplish that. But what I can tell you is that there's a number of structural modifications that you can make that is done on the opposite side of the molecule that doesn't have the binding affinity, right? So you can change these things without actually changing the binding affinity in many different ways. It's yet to be seen, again, once he's getting to the lab. I'm a firm believer that I think that if you reduce the half-life, it should still have similar outcomes, right? If you've ever experienced psychedelics, you have very little concept of time while you're actually under the experience. And I think that that's going to translate into, the shorter half-life is still have, significant outcomes. Obviously, we firmly believe that you also have that neuroplasticity that's involved, and kind of that extended neuron outgrowth. Maybe a month is what it's showing in mouse models. Obviously, very different than human models, but definitely, we do believe that's occurring in humans as well. So back to your question, there's a number of ways to either shorten or extend. A number of companies are using deuteration to extend some of these molecules. So DMT is definitely something that's very short and very intense. And maybe if you change that duration using deuteration, it might, eliminate some of the harshness or some of the basically insane onset that DMT has, right? Yeah. So if you can make that more gradual, maybe it has a less of an intense
your
effect.
Company is looking at maybe shortening some of these durations.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I guess that's for clinical use, right?
100%. So we're looking at, we have several libraries of psilocin analogs, psilocybin analogs that are second generation that we've made several modifications. So we've made the molecule skin permeable, which obviously if you look at, some of the work out of Imperial College of London, the intravenous delivery of psilocybin, even on a single molecule, normal untailored molecule of psilocybin, the onset was incredibly rapid if you delivered it intravenously, and the half-life was significantly reduced, right? So without any other modifications, just that one modification already started to accomplish what we wanted to, but then we made several other modifications and a stackable feature set, right? So these are individual modifications that each represent libraries of molecules that you can stack the feature set to make them modularly kind of available. But we also have a library of MDMA second generation analog as well that we've been able to modulate the half-life on as well. Cool. And that's something that we'll talk more about as the preclinicals start to come out over the next couple of months.
I'd love to switch gears. I know we have a little bit of time. We're getting short on time here. Some of the research that you guys are doing. So you're helping with this smoking cessation study down at Johns Hopkins and first NIDA-funded project in 50 years, right? Mm-hmm. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So we really got excited about smoking cessation about just over a year ago, and started the conversation with Dr. Matt Johnson out of Hopkins on, based off of his published preliminary work on the 15 patients. Average smoke time was 31 years. Average quit attempt was over 5. They underwent a treatment regimen of 3 macrodose sessions of psilocybin, coupled with cognitive behavioral therapy, both pre and post, right? And what they saw, mind you, is a small patient population, but what they saw at 6 months was 80% complete abstinence rate. At 1 year was about 67%, and at 2.5 years, 60% remained completely abstinent, right? That's incredible results, mind you, a small patient population. So that was progressed into a current underway larger study looking at 80 patients, 40 on nicotine patch, 40 on a single macrodose of 25 milligrams of psilocybin. And obviously we've been, discussing interim results, et cetera. And needless to say, they haven't been published yet. I can't talk too much about them, but they're looking promising, right? So we, about 9 months ago, started designing a seamless 2-3 study. So a 2B/3, basically what that is if you have a compelling story, and obviously we have significant data to support what we're doing, then you can move into a seamless 2-3 study, which combines a 2B and a 3 study, which obviously significantly reduces the time that it takes to get to market and commercializable. So, we're launching that study, we believe, Q1 2022, so right around the corner. When we first started talking to Matt, he had submitted for a NIDA grant, right, for the smoking cessation continuation study. Didn't hear back for a while, and then obviously, got some feedback, resubmitted. It came back the highest score Matt and his colleagues have ever seen on any sort of government funding application, period, right? So the government came back, and for the first time, like you said, is giving a $4 million grant for a multi-site study that'll be running concurrently with our study. It's an academically led study, so you can't commercialize the results, but needless to say, it's using our Myco 001 product as well. So the identical product that we have built and is our in-house proprietary product being used in both studies with very similar protocols. There's a couple nuanced changes. Ours is a single dose study. That's a multiple dose study. But needless to say, we believe that both should be incredibly successful. Furthermore, the validation of NIDA reviewing the study and the data that's currently been produced and agreeing to provide for the first time in 50 years a substantial amount of funding is really a validator for what we're doing and the promise of this as a viable smoking cessation study or treatment, and obviously furthermore kind of an addiction treatment more broadly.
It's huge, Josh, and I think the floodgates could open. Now that they're open for the first time in 50 years, it could be that this enables other trials to take place with federal funding, which is phenomenal. I also noticed something on your website around microdosing. It looked like there were 2 studies there, one in Imperial College with David Arizzo and one in Australia with Macquarie University.
That's right.
Yeah, I'm just very interested to hear about that. And if there's any way to tie in what you were speaking about before around wellness, and particularly how Mindleap is helping to educate people about themselves and to learn about regulating their body, their sleep, their feelings, their relationships. Because microdosing is a little bit more like that. It's integrated into one's lifestyle.
Yeah. So, microdosing right now, the issue with it is it's been very hard to conduct clinically based studies, right? Where they're actually providing the drug to people in a controlled and trackable fashion, right? It's just been for regulatory purposes, for, money restrictions, a number of different issues. And what the result is there hasn't really been any compelling evidence that show that it's effective or any better than the placebo effect, right? But however, when you talk to people individually, whether it's personal stories or people that you see, right, there's a profound effect on, individuals that are microdosing. So we're very interested as microdose as a viable treatment. From a pure business sense, the business case for providing a microdose drug where people are taking multiple times a week, for extended period of times is much easier to make than a curable single macrodose with therapy, right? Obviously, we want to cure people, so there's business cases for both. But if you were just looking at the business side, it would make a lot of sense. But from an overall wellness standpoint and what it can be used for, that's something that is unknown. So what we're doing is, sponsoring 2 kind of larger studies. That one is the first clinical-based study in Emma Query, and that's Vince Polito, Dr. Vince Polito, that's running that study, and then David Arizzo. And they're looking at large patient populations, really kind of in a nutshell, without too much detail, patient populations that are naturally microdosing, right? And tracking, 1, how they progress, but also 2, like what are people using this for and what are they reporting and where's the consistencies to use as a baseline that if we wanted to launch our own study, that at least we have a body of evidence and kind of a starting point for a hypothesis as to what should we really go after this and what are people reporting that's consistent, right? If you're looking at thousands of people and 90% of them are saying the same thing, there's probably some sort of, a good chance that there's going to be some derivative of effect that we can use as a starting point. So, that's really what they're exploratory studies, they're academically led studies. But, we're using the data to try to, better understand and formulate a plan moving forward as to, is microdosing viable? And if it is, how can we make a educated starting point of where we want to go with it?
That's awesome. Glad you're doing that. Whenever people bring up microdosing, I'm always like, yeah, we need more research, right? It's really hard to, I guess, sometimes justify it, even though there's a lot of subjective reports and people are really talking about the benefits. So yeah, glad to hear that. I know that we need to wrap up here soon. So anything that you want to close with that maybe we didn't touch on about Mydecine or your work?
Yeah, I mean, not so much about Mydecine. I think I want what I want to really try to be an advocate of, which I think is really important, is the way that these are portrayed publicly. I think is really important for everybody involved. And if people's goal collectively is to really bring these different molecules, which is what they are, and treatment modalities to the public and to treat large suffering populations, we need to change the context of how they're portrayed publicly. So the whole magic mushrooms or anything that has a recreational context that has been negatively portrayed over years needs to be eliminated. And we need to kind of reboot that public perception and really take it from a recreational context that has tons of negative press and publicity and makes people scared and nervous to use it as a real treatment, and change that messaging to, these are really safe, effective molecules that are showing tons of promise to really change the paradigm from ineffective, dangerous, redundant treatment modalities that have been accepted and just kind of, people have become complacent with, that we can really improve that and have a curative measure. But again, in order to get people to really publicly adopt that, the context needs to change on how it's portrayed.
Yeah, I agree. And where can people find your work?
Mydecine.com.
Awesome.
Yeah,
wonderful.
That's mydecine.com.
All right. Josh, David, thanks so much.
Thank you.
And there you have it. Ben Sessa, Josh Bartch, Awakn and Mydecine, beautiful companies. There's some really cool stuff happening, and I really hope things go well for both of those groups. Ben and Awakn's model around addiction therapy is very amazing. Treating, various substance use disorders with ketamine and other substances, amazing. Yeah, and the close affiliation with David Nutt certainly gives me a fondness. So really happy to see that. And the work at Mydecine, really impressive stuff. Yeah, patches, psilocybin patches alone. What a novel idea. Love it. So hope that really goes well. And I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you have any feedback, would love to hear from you. info@psychedelicstoday.com, or you can leave us feedback all over socials, Google, wherever, whatever podcast app you're on. We love it. And if you want to help us out, check out our classes at psychedelicstoday.com. Navigating Psychedelics for Clinicians and Therapists kicks off January 6th. We'd love to have you. Number of spaces still open. I think we're a little more than halfway sold out, maybe less. I don't know, right around there. So we got about a month. So if you want to join us, please do. We'd love it. And it's a great foundation for you, great way to network with others in the space all over the world, and quite the value, 47 hours of material, and at a bargain price, I think. Anyway, learn more, psychedelicstoday.com. All right, everybody. Joe Moore signing off for Psychedelics Today. We'll see you on the next episode. Have a beautiful weekend.